What is up, RotoGrinders? Welcome to another edition of FanDuel Friday. I'm your host, TJ Zwarych, joined by my good friend. It has been too long since I've gotten to see him. Luuch, how you doing, my friend?
What's up? I'm good. Let's hope for a less eventful Friday with no grounded flights or shot clock issues in the middle of a game where they brought out the big ladder or condensation on the floor. Like the NBA wasted no time reasserting its dominance as the drama kingpin of professional sports, TJ.
It has been 0 days since any unnecessary nonsense. But I don't think today is going to be any different. We're going to be breaking this one down. We're going to be looking at it from a full slate perspective. We're not going to be going game by game. We're going to talk some strategy. And I mean, one of the things with this is I'm fairly certain we're still going to be getting some news that we don't have yet here. We got a 9-game slate here ahead of us, multiple teams on back-to-backs. We got the Golden State Warriors on a back-to-back against Houston, of all teams, already without Jalen Green in this one. I got to imagine Klay Thompson is not going to be playing in this one. I got to imagine Draymond Green might end up taking a seat in this one. And if that happens, this is going to open up just a multitude of value. We already have the Milwaukee Bucks without Giannis Antetokounmpo tonight. So Jrue Holiday, among others, are looking like strong plays for the Milwaukee Bucks today. Durant still not returning. Curry's out. Jalen Green's out. Bradley Beal's questionable. We even got guys like in the mid tier, like Zubac's already out. Andrew Wiggins questionable. John Collins has a concussion. I think we're going to have a crazy amount of value potentially opening up in this slate, just like we did yesterday.
Yeah, you got to wonder, though, at what point do you play to move up in seeding and not rest your guys? I mean, the Warriors are penciled into a play-in tournament round right now, but they could move up. It's pretty cluttered in the bottom half of the Western Conference standings, but obviously they're dealing with a ton of injuries. Curry's been out, and everything you've alluded to. It's certainly interesting here, but there are a couple of games that are looking like they could be track meets tonight, and that's certainly one of them. As Golden State plays super fast. Houston plays no defense, and it definitely could be interesting. And there could be some value opening up, but expect the unexpected. Last night we had a bajillion Blazers coming in that were topping off all the models, after the starting lineups came out.
Starting with some of these early games, Mitchell Robinson might be coming back for this one for the Knicks. I don't know how much interest I have in that team as a whole, although Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson are always looking like strong tournament plays to me. Bradley Beal's questionable in this one. If he's out, that opens up more for Washington, but Kyle Kuzma's back now. So they do have more bodies in the lineup here. In the Cleveland and Atlanta game, Cleveland is on a back-to-back. We could see something funky hop up with them, but if not, all of them just sort of look like fine tournament plays to me. Evan Mobley's in a great spot. He's underpriced, but none of these guys are standing out outside of him in particular. On the Atlanta side of things, yeah, they got John Collins out, but they just recently acquired Sadiq Bey. They have bodies. These guys are healthy and in a really tough matchup. Miami, same thing. Outside of Kyle Lowry, these guys got bodies healthy today. They're priced appropriately for the roles that they're in. Outside of maybe some hero shots in tournaments, I don't know how much I want to get to these guys, but let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks because Giannis Antetokounmpo is out today. They do have a tough matchup, and so because of that, these guys aren't actually popping that crazily in projections today. Jrue Holiday just looks like a solid play. Brook Lopez is just a fine tournament play, but Bobby Portis is popping as one of the better plays on the slates. And then even a guy like Javon Carter is looking like he's going to pick up some extra minutes today and be in the conversation for a value play.
Yeah, coming in at a pretty high projected ownership number. Obviously, you like the price. Tough to want to play him on a fairly decent slate here, with Middleton back and picking up some steam as well. Hopefully some other value opens up. I don't really want to play Javon Carter, Yeah, and you made a good point. It's a really low team total for Milwaukee because of the matchup and no Giannis. But I have no doubts that one of these guys could potentially have a ceiling game, whether it's Drew or Brooke Lopez or Portis. I'm not sure. I don't know if I want to play more than one of them on any of my teams, though. So maybe I'd set a build rule, in my opinion, and cap them off at a max of one, unless you're just going to stack that game and go totally contrarian. Then I understand. But I do think there's some merit to rostering someone from Milwaukee for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do feel like one of these guys is likely to have a good game in Giannis's absence. It's just a matter of this is probably going to be a slow defensive game, as my cat Shadow says hello right in front of the screen here. Let's get you out of the way, pal. Now, moving on here, we got the new look Brooklyn Nets going up against the Chicago Bulls. Mikal Bridges has been crushing in this new role, and so I don't hate him for tournaments. Same with Spencer Dinwiddie, but outside of those two, I don't think I'm going to be getting to a lot of these guys in tournaments today. Maybe a Cameron Johnson, but that's going to be it for me. I feel like this Brooklyn team put together a decent looking little team here while acquiring all of those draft picks. On the Chicago side of things, I mean, in theory, I feel like Brooklyn should be a really good defensive team now with Mikal Bridges up in there. Dorian Finney-Smith, a great wing defender. Cam Johnson's no slouch. Ben Simmons can defend when he's in there. Chicago's pretty healthy, and if Chicago's pretty healthy, that usually means to me I can play one of Vucevic, DeRozan, or Levine, and that's about it. We got a big total game here at the last 8 o'clock one, though. And obviously, we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about these 3 late night hammer games than some of these earlier ones. But I do want to focus a little bit on Charlotte and Minnesota, just because this is a huge total in comparison to some of the ones we've seen in these early games. 123.5 for Minnesota, 117.5 for Charlotte. Minnesota is now without D'Angelo Russell. Yeah, they got Mike Conley back. He's not quite as high of a usage rate guy, though. And they also are still without Karl Anthony Towns. So this Minnesota team is interesting to me. Charlotte is interesting to me. They might have Kelly Oubre back, but guys like Rozier and LaMelo Ball still always interest me. And then, of course, we're without Mason Plumlee. He's not on this team anymore. So Mark Williams, even though he's up to 5.7K now, is still rating out as one of the better value plays on the slate. So talk to me about the Charlotte Hornets first off.
Yeah, of course. Charlotte was pretty active at the trade deadline as well. LaMelo absolutely crushing before the break, playing a ton of minutes. The leash is finally off. His usage rate is over 30 across the last 4 weeks without Plumlee, McDaniels, and Martin on the court. So I think LaMelo is in a very interesting spot. Projections are, probably where they should be, although this game environment has a chance to be so electric that you're going to see a little bit of sticker shock here probably. But I think LaMelo has a fantastic opportunity to have another ceiling game tonight at his price. Minnesota is a pretty good matchup for point guards. I know that roster's a little bit different now, and of course they're a little bit better with Gobert on the floor than when he's not. But this pace should be through the roof. 2 of the top 3 fastest teams in the NBA, TJ. So I know we're going to talk about Anthony Edwards, and I love the idea of pairing him with LaMelo on the other side here. Those two could seriously combine for like 120 fantasy points tonight on a, ideal situation if you're stacking them together.
I agree with you completely. Let's look at this Minnesota side. Anthony Edwards at 9.4K. Probably my favorite spend up on this slate just because he's barely even a spend up. This is almost the mid-range. So a 9.4K Anthony Edwards, I love it. Kyle Anderson is a great play today. I'll be sprinkling in Rudy Gobert and Mike Conley into tournaments. Maybe a little bit of Jaden McDaniels, but probably not very much. He's the type of guy that he's only really reaching that ceiling if he gets 3 steals and a block or 2. So McDaniels is lower on that priority tier for me, but Anthony Edwards is one of my favorite plays on the slate. He'd be in nearly every one of my lineups at this price tag over here. And then obviously you got LaMelo as a good run back. And I do think guys like Terry Rozier, PJ Washington are very interesting tournament run backs. And Mark Williams makes for a great one as well. The Houston Rockets are still without Kevin Porter Jr. They're without Jalen Green today. Alperen Şengün is projecting as the very best play on the slate, the singular best play on the slate, a 7 RotoGrinders value, by far the highest on the slate. They only got a 110 total. This is a big old spread, but we talked about the potential of Golden State sitting guys on a back-to-back, so that could make this one a little bit closer here if that is going to be the case. We know we have a lot of value and a lot of options on this Houston side. We may on the Golden State side as well.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game to see how it plays out from Houston's side here. I think you have to take Jabari Smith and KJ Martin into consideration here. Jabari Smith without Porter and without Jalen Green, and of course Eric Gordon departed at the deadline as well. His numbers really get a boost here. So the math checks out. Let's just hope he finally performs. I feel like he's a guy I never get right here, but he should play well over 30 minutes. He's a pretty good value play, priced in the mid-5s here. Golden State, we know they play fast, and like you alluded to earlier, there's a chance that Draymond or Clay sit tonight, maybe both. Who knows? And maybe you don't have to worry about that 10-point spread as much and not worry about a blowout when some news breaks a little bit later.
At this point, Şengün, Smith, and Tate are basically all looking like cash game plays with that, with the way they're popping in projections right now. I do think Terry Eason is going to be one of the more interesting tournament plays on the slate as well. The Golden State side of things, they're without Curry, they're without Wiggins already. As it stands right now, Jordan Poole looks like a great play. Draymond Green looks very interesting for tournaments, and Jordan Kuminga is a fantastic value. But if we happen to get Thompson and Green both out, that really opens the door for Kuminga. It opens the door for somebody like Ty Jerome to pick up a couple extra minutes. Dante DiVincenzo probably becomes one of the better plays on the slate. So keep an eye on this Golden State injury report. We may not get that news until late if they happen to be ruled in as questionable on their initial report. But even though this is a back-to-back, even though this is at 10 o'clock because it's a back-to-back, we might find out that they're just going to be rested earlier in the day. OKC and Phoenix, this is only really going to be interesting to me if OKC ends up sitting some guys. Phoenix is getting healthier here. I'm not too interested in getting to too many of them other than maybe a Josh Okogie in tournaments. Everybody else, I think, is priced appropriately. Finally, in the Sacramento and Clippers game, on the Sacramento side of things, if everybody plays, it's really just Sabonis and maybe Fox in tournaments for me. That's about it. But this is a back-to-back for this team as well. Harrison Barnes is really cheap if you want to go there. But I do think it's also interesting to take a look at. You had Terrence Davis, who's been playing a little bit more minutes lately. And that's a guy that if he pushes minutes, he could really put up a big day. So he's somebody I think in a 150 max. That's interesting. We got Russell Westbrook back in the starting lineup today, but this time for the Los Angeles Clippers, the new look Clippers. They're without Zubats. They got Mason Plumlee over there now. Kawhi and Paul George are playing. Russell Westbrook in the starting lineup. This is basically looking like the old school OKC Thunder 2.0 here. This is a big total. It's a decently close spread. Do you have any interest in this game?
Too many cooks in the kitchen, I think, for the Clippers at their prices. I'm going to wait and see what Westbrook's usage in the starting lineup, how it affects Kawhi and Paul George. It's tough enough to play either one of Kawhi or Paul George and guess when they're going to hit their ceiling games. And we haven't really seen it too often when they've played together at their prices. In fact, we saw probably Kawhi's worst game of the season right before the All-Star break. And of course, you don't want to let recency bias come into play, but I'm out on the Clippers as long as Westbrook's going to be logging a bunch of his minutes alongside of Kawhi and Paul George. It's tough for me to want to play any of them, even with the super high total against Sacramento.
I'm willing to take a shot on Paul George just because of that price tag. Like Kawhi's 10K and Paul George is 8.6. So just because of that, at less than 5% ownership, last game of the slate, if I'm running 150, I'll definitely take some shots on Paul George because of that price tag. But I agree with you. Too many cooks in the kitchen. Not a great spot tonight. We're still waiting on a lot of potential injury news with these teams on back-to-backs. But outside of that, we seem to kind of have a straightforward slate. The Rockets, the Timberwolves, those are probably the two top teams we're going to be targeting today. Şengün is one of the top plays on the slate. Anthony Edwards is one of our favorite plays on the slate as well. We talked about a few ways that you can get different in here, but the core of your lineup is likely going to be Houston and Minnesota, and also Golden State if we happen to get a few guys rolled out here.
Yeah, and just that Milwaukee situation is interesting without Giannis, even though it's a very low total. I'm wondering when they're going to bump up Chris Middleton's minutes, maybe 5 or 6 more minutes. It's going to happen eventually, and it'll probably happen in a game where we won't get word beforehand that his minutes are
Fresh
going to
off the All-Star break when he just got some nice rest.
And per minute, he's been really crushing. I mean, you see his low minute totals on the game log, but if you do the math, 30 fantasy points in 24 minutes, 34 and 24, 37 and 20, if they run this guy 30, even it's kind of a brutal matchup in total here, Middleton could be the guy. Initially without looking, you say 6K projected to play 24 minutes. I mean, we don't know unless we get word of when the minutes bump is going to come, but he had some time off. There's no Giannis. Middleton is a favorite flyer of mine for tonight. Large field tournament look only, probably.
I agree with you there. The one thing I will say is, you look at this Chris Middleton situation, you bump him up to 28 minutes today, and all of a sudden he's one of the better value plays on the slate. And so definitely somebody I think you want to keep in mind for tournaments. If he's in the starting lineup today, go way overweight. If he's in the starting lineup today, I think he's going to end up being one of the better plays on the slate.
We will see what drama the NBA brings on this Friday to its follow-up from Thursday's chaos.
And the Grinders Live crew will be there breaking it down. The Crunch Time crew will be taking you up to lock, so make sure you tune in there. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button. That'll do it for this edition of FanDuel Friday. We will see you next week. Make sure you check out all the great deals and promos they got going over on the FanDuel Sportsbook. And we got you covered here on RotoGrinders with Scores and Odds with Parlay IQ and Lineup HQ to help you in the DFS land and the sports betting land as well. We will see you next week. On behalf of myself, Luuch, and the amazing RG production team, peace.